The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Hi, I'm Mary Rozak, the Director of Communications for Albany County, and this is Albany County News. In the next 30 minutes or so, you're going to hear about one of the departments in Albany County that I certainly hope you never have to use. You'll understand what I mean in just a moment when I introduce who our guest is today. Our guest is Sherri Brooks, the alternate public defender. Sherri, I love you, but I hope I never have to use your services.
I hope not either, Mary.
All right, so we are going to jump in and talk about first, people know when they hear public defender. You are a public defender of sorts, but your title is alternate public defender. So why don't you tell us the difference first and foremost, public defender, and then what you do as alternate public defender.
So everybody is familiar with the public defender, we find, and when I was appointed to this position, I got this question 20 times a day. What exactly is the alternate public defender? Mm-hmm. So we're more commonly known actually as the conflict defender. So we are literally identical in function. So if you financially qualify for our services, you are entitled to have counsel appointed to you by the court. In our situation, it's by the court. So I'll compare the two. With the public defender's office, there is an application. If you are financially, it's not indigent anymore. So now you find that there's a lot of working poor who just can't afford the expense of paying for a private attorney. So if you qualify financially, then the application process starts with the public defender's office. If for some reason there's a conflict, for instance, you and I get arrested together, the public defender can't represent both of us.
Because you and I work together? Because you and I...
Because we are co-defendants in the same action, and we could be in a position where I'm blaming you and you're blaming me. So that creates a conflict for the attorney who represents both, because now they're trying to side with both people.
So, but there's more than one attorney in the public defender's office. Are you saying that you can't have more than one attorney in the public defender's office defending the client's charged with the same crime?
That is correct, because in an office situation, we find that, you can have access to the files, you can have access to the information, and I know in theory you can say, don't let this attorney see the file, but the reality of it is, for a client, that's not enough. So there's an alternate public defender in those instances, so that we are actually appointed by the court. So if the public defender says there's a conflict, then the court has to actually appoint us. There's no application process through our office. And then we, like I said, have the identical functions. We will represent you from arraignment through trial, but it's in the event of a conflict.
So you're not housed in the same office?
We are not.
You're probably not. Are you even on the same floor?
We're not in the same building.
You're not in the same building?
No. Public defender is on Pearl Street, and we're on State Street.
So, for all intent and purposes, you're representing different clients. You're out for the best interest of your own client.
Oh, absolutely. We are two very distinct offices who serve the exact same function.
Now, the way you've just described this, one would think this doesn't come up all the time. How often does it happen, and how busy actually are you?
It comes up fairly often, in the sense that we'll see a lot of co-defendants. What you'll also see is if the public defender represents a client and then that person becomes a victim in another case, which, our county is pretty small, and you'll see a lot of the same people involved in the same cases. So if that person now becomes a victim, that defendant also can't be represented by the public defender. So
is there a period of time that is there like, for 5 years, or is it just always?
If the case is open. Okay. If the case is open. So in those cases, we are also appointed. Or if there's a situation where my cousin got arrested, for instance, that would be a conflict. So just best practice is that it would go to a different office.
Okay.
So we have about 2,000 cases a year. So
that's a significant amount of cases.
So we see it pretty often. Yeah.
So is it just you?
My office is not just me. I am one of 9 attorneys in the office. 8 are full-time, 1 is part-time, and we have 2 administrative staff. And we have 3 attorneys 3 of those 9 are assigned to family court full-time.
Okay, so it's not then just, as I said earlier, it's not just criminal then, there are family court actions.
Absolutely. So we have a family court division. There are 4 full-time family court judges. We have 3 attorneys assigned to our family court office, which is actually in the family courthouse, full-time, and they divvy up the 4 judges. And then the other remaining attorneys divvy up every single criminal court in the county.
So how often then would there be an instance where the public defender says, okay, there's a conflict, so it goes to the conflict defender's office. Are there ever times when there's a conflict in your office? And if there is, what happens then?
So there's plenty of times where there's conflict in my office, and that's when we go to the 18B panel. So the 18B panel is a panel of private attorneys who are appointed by the court but paid by the county. And so in the event of an additional conflict, then the court chooses the lawyer, and that lawyer submits vouchers to the county for repayment.
Okay. What comes to mind, I know, is something that, when there's a large scale, perhaps a drug case or something of that nature is what I'm thinking of, where then it gets parsed out. Everybody gets a little piece of the action, so to speak, of the court action, right?
Absolutely. We've had attorney general cases where there's 30 co-defendants, and you'll see a line of attorneys. Public defender gets the first one, conflict defender gets the second one, and then you'll see 28 18B attorneys all streaming in because the clerks frantically start to call them all and say, get to the courthouse, we need to appoint lawyers for all these defendants that are being arraigned today.
Just so we can explain a little bit further, when it comes to the 18B, is there like a list, or is that any attorney who wants to be on a list, or how does the 18B work? Have you ever been one?
I've never been one. As a county employee, we actually can't be on that panel, but there's not a list per se. There's an application process in that you submit a resume to that particular court, and they have the option to choose you. And the judges just go through, the panel is
Sure.
not that big. So,
Sure.
generally speaking, the judges do a rotation, and it'll just go through the regular 18B attorneys.
Sure. Didn't mean to put you on the spot on that. I know that.
Oh, no.
I'm just thinking that it's probably, there are people out there. It's fascinating when you think about the different layers and different levels.
Well, actually, apparently, when our office was created, the conflict defender was responsible for appointing the 18B attorneys, but somewhere in that transition, it felt like it would be a conflict for us to be responsible for who the 18B attorney is, so that got delegated to the courts.
Interesting. So you were appointed, and I know this, you were appointed during the county executive's first term.
I was, 2012.
Let's talk about your background and how you came to be appointed the conflict defender.
So I was born and raised in Albany. I was a public defender for 5 years. And then in 2011, I actually ran for city court judge. So I actually met the county executive when he was the chairman of the Democratic Party. So I had the opportunity to interact with him and get to know him. And I unfortunately lost that race, but I shouldn't say unfortunately, because now I'm so happy to be where I am.
We're lucky to have you, right?
I'm lucky to be here. So that year he also ran, or the following year I should say, he also ran. And when he won, I guess I made a good impression. and he picked me. And
we've had you ever since. What are some of I'll ask you if you can share, and maybe in the broadest terms, what are some of the most interesting things that you have done, or cases that you've had, like I said, in the broadest terms, because I know you can't be very specific, when it comes to your position as the conflict defender?
Interesting.
Or challenging?
I get this question a lot. How do you represent someone that you know is guilty? No.
Well, the question is, do you necessarily know someone? Is someone's presumed innocent?
They are.
Until proven guilty, right?
But also in confidentiality, we're told if,
Sure.
Oftentimes we will know if, it'll be disclosed at some point if the person has committed the crime or not. But our position is this: the justice system was designed to, have justice. So, our position is, if the system is going to work, and the DA's office does their part, the judges do their part, the police do their part, then the right result will happen. So I have no qualms about representing someone who I know is innocent, because I feel like, if the process worked how it should work, then that person will ultimately end up with the right resolution. So I just want to make sure that justice happens for everyone and it's fair, because we can't have, I guess the opposite side of that is our biggest fear is an innocent person who is convicted. So I always say I would rather see a guilty person go free than an innocent person not.
And it's interesting because we hear with the advances in DNA testing and all kinds of things, although now I just feel like the DNA testing thing, it's not advances in it, it's nothing new anymore, right?
No.
But we've heard about people's convictions that have been overturned, people who are out, and I'm talking on a national scale, 20 years. They were convicted. So, I mean, that's just, you wonder how that happens.
I just can't imagine the impact on, let's say, you or I, if somebody accused us of a crime. And it doesn't necessarily need to be malicious. You could literally have a case of mistaken identity, someone who really believes that you were that person, or you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and all the circumstantial evidence points to you. But, the gravity of an innocent person going away, far outweighs, a guilty person going for it.
Certainly. We are talking with Sherri Brooks, the alternate public defender, also known as the conflict defender in Albany County. Sherri, some of the things that we hear about, just before I reintroduced you, what comes to mind is the county executives initiative and being in the forefront for indigent legal services. And when you're talking about an innocent person being put behind bars, the gravitas behind that, I think of Khalif Browder, the young man who was incarcerated, who had not been convicted, who found himself for 3 years behind bars for something that, an accusation that he had stolen a backpack.
Right.
Is a story like that, and I'm making a presumption because I do know you, and I know I know how it comes from the heart and how emotional you are about the law. Is something like that what got you into practicing law to begin with, or what really was the driving force?
It's so funny because I always want to tell this great story about why I wanted to be a lawyer, but it literally, I was a senior in college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I said, I'm scared of blood, so I don't want to go to medical school. So I'll go to law school. And it was just this whim. And I said, as a law student, I will never do criminal law. I just didn't want any parts of it. And now I can't imagine doing anything else.
So how did you wind up doing criminal law?
I got out of law school and I was doing some civil stuff and evictions, and there was a part-time public defender position opening up, and I was like, that would be a great experience. And I lived in the South End until literally 4 months ago, so I would get approached by so many people when I was in law school and when I became a lawyer about their concerns with the legal system, and it was disturbing to me. And so, when I became a public defender and I would see the families just distraught and people who I felt like were just things that were very disturbing to me. I really wanted to see better things happening, and that made me very passionate about, I always joke that I was on a one-woman mission to change the whole entire public defender's office at the time because I thought I was going to save the world. But, that made me very passionate about what I do. And now, my only concern for my office is that every single person that comes through my office gets the same quality representation that if they had paid top dollar for it, because it's just not fair to these families that they feel like it is so frustrating to have a mom say, well, I had to have the public defender because I couldn't, or the conflict defender because I couldn't afford a lawyer. But you shouldn't feel that way. You should feel like you got the same representation regardless of if you could afford it or not. It should not be two systems of justice.
And that is really what this indigent legal services and this whole push for the county executive is behind. How does it work then when cases are assigned then to your office? They're not per se assigned to a particular attorney. You take care of doing that. How's that determination? Are there specialists in certain areas?
So we have a system we have a staff who is primarily assigned to felony level cases and a staff who is assigned to misdemeanor level cases. So the felony level attorneys, for instance, have a rotation. So for every week, it's divided up one person. Every preliminary hearing that's assigned that week is that person's, and they keep that case through. So it gets divvied up that way. And then our misdemeanor attorneys, they're divided up by judge. So they keep whatever cases are in front of their judge.
Okay. 2,000 cases a year, that's a lot. Isn't that a lot for 9 attorneys? It sounds like a lot from my perspective.
It is a lot in theory, but my attorneys just do an amazing job. And I think in perspective, that includes a lot of family court cases, which it's just a different, I don't know how to describe it, but it's just a different, you can definitely have, I would say, more cases there than you could have in a criminal court because they don't generally last as long. You don't have to do as much on a lot of them. So the criminal attorneys have less of a caseload, and they definitely have a very manageable number that they can devote substantial amounts of time to each defendant. They are very, very fortunate in that we have a great staff, a full staff, and they are not overwhelmed. There's many systems that are overwhelmed.
And so you are at full staff?
We are.
Okay. How often are you in court? I mean, is it really divided by everyone in the office? How does that work?
Well, not divided by everybody but me. So I actually have to do all the administrative stuff of the office. So if we are a team, and we are really, really a team. Everybody has everybody's back. They cover for one another. A lot of the attorneys will have me sit in on family meetings just to add another perspective, just to make sure that they're getting out everything. Did I miss anything? Do you see anything about this? So I sit in on meetings with a lot of clients, a lot of families. If there's a client who's, being difficult, we'll say, I'll go to the jail a lot of times and try and, talk to them and see what's going on. If somebody's out sick, for instance, then I would cover that. So, but I don't have a caseload myself.
Okay. That's got to be hard, though, when someone's out sick, all of a sudden you're trying to cover on something that you may not be quite, you probably have a general idea, but not.
I find clients are very understanding about, I'm here today, I find they like me, so they don't seem to mind. I mean, I like to think that
You're
at
supposed
least.
to say what's not to like.
Well,
right?
I know. I like to think that. So I find that people get sick. Kids get sick. People are generally very understanding of that. And if it is something very particular that another attorney doesn't know, or it's an intricate detail that attorney's worked a lot on, then the judges are very accommodating, and they will just adjourn it.
Sure. Talking about kids, you know a lot about kids.
Too much about kids.
and as we sit here, you are not going to be leaving early because you still have a little bit of time left before you have another child. But let's talk about family life and balancing, because you are really balancing.
I have to. So my husband and I have been together for a very long time. We have a 21-year-old son who is a college senior at St. Rose.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's a struggle, having a 21-year-old, and then our youngest is 3. So, it's a big range. We have a 14-year-old son who's a freshman, a 10-year-old daughter, a 3-year-old daughter, and now we don't know the sex of this baby, but surprise number 5.
Well, you'll be paying for college forever.
Yeah. I need another job, actually.
Oh my gosh, you bet you're going to have another 21 years.
You just want to thought my house would be empty.
But it's also got to be exciting.
Oh, so exciting.
I've got to imagine that the kids at the various ages are very proud of mom.
I hope so. My kids are, they're much like my husband. They're very flat a lot of times, so they seem very proud and they are very grateful, but they're not overly emotional. So when I'm so worked up, I'm very animated, and, they're like, okay, Mom, I'll come home, I got this job, it's great. And they're like, Okay.
Your oldest.
My oldest,
What's the career objective there?
like his mom, he has no idea.
No idea. A senior and no, like graduating like in 3 minutes? and
No
not- okay.
idea. Nope. He went from he wanted to be a child psychologist to a trooper to.
Okay.
So I always said to him, because this is exactly what I did, you maintain good grades and you can do whatever you want. You know, if you want to go into graduate school, you can do that. If you want to do something else, you can do that. Because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But luckily, because of my grades, I had options. So I just
Wow.
tell them, make sure you do well and you'll have a lot of choices.
Well, that's a very understanding parent. Like I said, when we're about 3 minutes away from graduation.
Seriously.
But
One more bill that I just want to be done with.
have there ever been any questions though about law school?
Actually, none of them want to be a lawyer.
Really?
None. Nope. I don't know if I've ruined them for that forever.
Well, maybe they've seen. I'm sure. Unlike other professions, I mean, you're really working a lot.
All the time. You're always on, so to speak. Your phone, I know your phone is nonstop. The phone calls are nonstop. I love our clients. They're great, but there's no disconnect. So when I'm out with my kids, I get approached all the time. There's no, this is personal time, this is work time. It's all, Sherri is always the lawyer. And so I try to separate that, but realistically speaking, that's not always possible.
So how often is it that you may get a middle of the night call to go to court, to go somewhere? Is that fairly regular or not so much in your role?
So with the new counsel at arraignment grant, actually, the public defenders have a rotation where they get, I think it's 3 attorneys a week who are on call that go to these overnight arraignments or off-hours arraignments. And we actually, as a part of the grant, got a part-time attorney.
Okay.
So that part-time attorney is on staff 17 and a half hours a week. What generally happens is the public defenders that get called out in the middle of the night stand in for both arraignments, and then we'll get appointed, and then we'll step in after that. So we rarely after hours get called because the public defenders are amazing and that they're going anyway.
Sure,
so they
sure.
just handle it. Although we have, but it's very few and far between.
But you're talking your regular caseload is where you.
Yeah, I mean, most of the
regular
arraignments are generally, during business hours. I mean, arraignments during business hours, we get called by courts all the time. But after hours, it's not very often. And city court is open every single day of the year, so 365 days.
Yeah, they never close.
Never close. So there could be arraignments on Christmas, Easter, any holiday, any weekend. Pretty much every day there is an arraignment. So.
Have you ever felt any particular stress or challenge or need to maybe work harder or do anything differently? Let's start, number one, because you're a woman in this profession.
So it's ironic that you say that, because I tell my kids that, when I first got out of law school, I would walk into a courtroom and people would assume I was a defendant. And deputies would ask me to sign in. And I said, my grades are great and I did well in all my schooling, but on its face, people still don't. They see me as I was young and whatever it was. My hair's, as sometimes wild.
Sometimes it's purple,
right.
sometimes it's red.
It runs the gamut. You never really know with me. I have purple lipstick sometimes, But people, there's this stereotypical impression of what a lawyer looks like. And no matter how much you dress the part or look the part, I can't change the fact that this is how I look. And so sometimes I feel like I have to work twice as hard to prove myself because I already am like one leg under because of the impression that people have. I don't know why, but.
Do you ever, how do you address that with your clients? Because I would assume that clients, you might say, you should be dressing this way, you should be doing this because there's a perception.
Absolutely. When we come to court, don't wear a hoodie, don't wear jeans. You are in a courtroom, and I have interns, and I tell them the same thing. When you are in a courtroom, you should be dressed accordingly. If you want respect, then you need to act in a way that will earn you respect. So, you know, you look the part, you act the part, you behave in a certain way. And eventually, you know, not everybody is going to give it to you. And you just have to live with that. I'm sure you know.
Sure.
So you can't do it all. You know, you can't win it all, but you can do what you can.
Your biggest challenge, what do you find has been or continues to be maybe something if it's daily or something that has been, you know, the biggest challenge ever? What is one of the challenges or the biggest challenge you may have run into?
In my profession?
You know what? Let's just lay it out all the way around. Is your biggest challenge being a mom? Is your biggest challenge being a lawyer? And have you had any particular, I mean, I don't know.
Well, I had my first son at 16. So, you know, I always felt like the more challenges I had, the more I was motivated. So my mom was so disappointed. I mean, what mom wouldn't be? And I felt like from that point, I had to prove to her that now I'm going to be better, because I don't want you to think that because of this, that I'm not going to do anything. So I feel like every challenge makes you work harder, because then you have to now this obstacle to overcome and prove. Like, just because of this doesn't make me, you know, me less. So I don't know. Every challenge, I just take it as a stepping stone to do something bigger.
As I'm doing the math, my goodness, you've accomplished quite a bit in a relatively short period of time.
I try.
You know, you probably hear a lot of lawyer jokes in your time.
Oh boy, I make a lot of lawyer jokes actually.
Do you really? All right. Are there any clean lawyer jokes you can share?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. There's something about a lawyer and a judge and you know, a communications director walking down the street.
My mom might see this.
You know, for those who are watching, and I truly think, and I know there are just a few tears right now, because you really have accomplished quite a bit, and I know that Albany County is very proud to have you, and I know County Executive McQuay has said that on more than one occasion. For those who are watching, and you've given some very good advice if there are college students watching to say, hey, you know, you don't know what you want to do, but, you know, just do it. What about those, you know, young men and women who are out there who don't feel like they've made the right choices? And what would you say to them when they're actually assessing what they want to do and how they would do it? Because you sound like you really
I've
had a plan.
made wrong choices. You know what I mean? You get through them. It's not the end of the world. You can't look at that decision as the end. You have to figure out now what, you know. I'm in high school pregnant, and I can't say, well, now I can't finish. I have to say, what do I need to do with this child to finish? And this is what I have to do to be better. So, you know, I'm not big on excuses. My kids will tell you. You know, I know we all have things that prevent us in some way, but you find a way if you really, really have to or want to. And I say, I don't want to hear the excuses. I want to hear the solution.
Sherri, I think people will love the 30 minutes that we've just spent together.
Was that 30 minutes?
Yeah, just about. And you know what? I hope they never have to meet you because they need you in person. But I certainly hope they have a chance to run into you. I know that there are several things that you do, and you're asked to speak at different places. And I certainly hope people get an opportunity to hear you there.
I'm approachable, so anybody can always, you know, if you see me, you recognize me. People always come up to me.
Stop you on the street and ask you for advice, right?
Yeah. That's what they do anyway.
Well,
I'm used to it.
Thank you, Sherri, for joining us today. Sherri Brooks, the alternate public defender for Albany County. I'm Mary Rozak, Director of Communications in Albany County. I hope you've enjoyed today's program, and we'll see you again soon.